50,000 people stopped breathing at exactly the same moment. Not because of a winner. Not because of a championship point. Not because of anything that should have mattered in a professional tennis match. They stopped breathing because a 19-year-old girl from Manila leaned toward a German ball kid during a routine 30-second break and spoke, not in English, not in Filipino, not in Spanish, in fluent, warm, completely natural German. And the entire stadium of Berlin lost its absolute mind. Phones flew into the air. Strangers grabbed each other by the arms. A woman in the front row pressed both hands over her mouth like she had just witnessed something sacred. And Steffi Graf, the greatest German tennis player who ever lived, stood completely, utterly, breathlessly frozen. Ask yourself this right now. When was the last time a legend was silenced not by defeat, but by someone else's humanity? This is not a story about a tennis match. This is not a story about rankings or prize money or who won the second set. This is the story of a single 30-second moment that rewrote what it means to belong in a sport that has always been very selective about who gets to feel like they belong. And if you think you already understand what happened in Berlin that afternoon, I promise you, you do not. Because the surface version of this story is impressive. The real version is extraordinary. Stay with me. Alex Eala was born in Manila in 2005 into a family that saw something electric in her before she could even explain it herself. Her father Michael, a former professional tennis player, watched his daughter move on a court and understood immediately that this was not recreational talent. This was something rare. Something that demanded sacrifice at a level most families would never sustain. So they made the decision that changed everything. They sent her to Spain, specifically to the Rafa Nadal Academy in Manacor, one of the most demanding, selective, and prestigious tennis development programs on the entire planet. A place where 12-hour training days are standard. A place where teenage homesickness is treated as a personal problem, not an institutional concern. A place where only the genuinely extraordinary survive long enough to graduate into professional tennis. Here is the question nobody asks about that decision. What does it actually cost a family to send a 12-year-old girl across the world alone chasing something that might never pay off? Eala didn't just survive the Nadal Academy. She dominated it. She won the Junior Australian Open in 2022. She won the Junior US Open the same calendar year. She became the first Filipino in history to win a Grand Slam title at any level, junior or senior, and she did it without a major sponsor attached to her name, without the institutional machinery that launches most young players into global consciousness, without the same systems and structures that players from wealthier tennis nations take entirely for granted. But here is the detail that almost nobody talks about when they celebrate those titles. The detail that makes the Berlin moment not just surprising, but completely inevitable in hindsight. During those years in Manacor, surrounded by Spanish coaches and European training partners and an academy culture that operated fluently across multiple languages, Eala was absorbing something far beyond footwork and forehand mechanics. She was absorbing Europe itself. She was learning how to navigate multilingual environments without hesitation. She was traveling to German-speaking tournaments during her junior development years. She was spending extended time in environments where German wasn't a novelty, it was simply the language of the people around her. So while the world was watching her win junior Grand Slams and assuming her story was purely about athletic brilliance, something else was quietly assembling beneath the surface. A young woman was learning how to walk into any room in the world and make it feel like home. Does that kind of person sound like someone who would hesitate for even 1 second before speaking German to a German teenager in Berlin? Keep that question in mind. By the time Eala arrived in Berlin for the tournament that would produce the most talked-about non-tennis moment in recent women's tennis memory, she was not a visitor. She was not a curiosity. She was not the exotic underdog the European crowds were prepared to politely applaud before watching her exit in the early rounds. She was a ranked professional, a Grand Slam-level competitor, someone who had already demonstrated that she belonged in every room the sport had to offer. Berlin simply didn't fully know it yet. And then came the changeover that changed everything. Understand what a changeover is designed to do. It is designed to be completely forgettable. 90 seconds of functional necessity. Players sit, towel off, hydrate, collect themselves. Ball kids move efficiently in the background, almost invisible by institutional design. The crowd shifts, checks phones, murmurs quietly. Nothing happens during a changeover. That is the entire point of a changeover. Except on this particular afternoon in Berlin, something happened that nobody had scheduled, that no broadcast team had anticipated, and that would be replicated across social media platforms within minutes of occurring. Eala was seated courtside mid-match, somewhere in the second set of a fiercely contested encounter. The Berlin crowd had been warm throughout, engaged, appreciative, but the atmosphere hadn't shifted into something electric yet. They were watching a talented young Filipina compete with skill and composure, but the room hadn't ignited. Then a young German ball kid, maybe 14 or 15 years old, approached Eala's end of the court to retrieve a towel. Standard. Invisible. A completely unremarkable interaction on any other day in any other match. Eala looked up, and instead of the polite nod, the half-smile, the silent transactional acknowledgement that players typically offer ball kids, she spoke. In German. Warm, colloquial, completely natural German. Not textbook phrases delivered with tourist confidence, but genuine conversational language, the kind you only develop through actual immersion in actual places with actual people. The ball kid's face transformed instantly. Shock dissolved into absolute delight. A grin spread wide enough to be visible from the upper tiers. And then the front rows heard it. And then the middle sections heard it. And then the entire stadium understood simultaneously what had just occurred. The applause did not build gradually. It detonated. A sudden, overwhelming, collective sound that had absolutely nothing to do with a match point being won or a winner being struck. It was the sound of an entire stadium falling in love with someone in real time. And Eala herself, she looked genuinely surprised. She glanced around the arena with an expression caught perfectly between amusement and humility, as if she hadn't calculated the effect at all, as if speaking German to a German teenager on German soil required no explanation whatsoever, as if this had simply been the natural thing to do in that moment. That authenticity, that complete absence of performance, is precisely what shattered the crowd completely. Now stop and ask yourself something honestly. When was the last time you watched a professional athlete do something completely unnecessary, something that gained them absolutely nothing strategically, and felt genuinely moved by it? Because that is exactly what Berlin was processing in those seconds. Here is what the crowd understood instinctively before they could even articulate it. This was not performance. This was not calculated charm deployed by a media-trained athlete for strategic likability. This was a young woman from the Philippines, raised partially in Spain, competing in Germany, who had quietly taken the time somewhere in the years of training and traveling and sacrificing to learn the language of the country she was visiting, not because anyone required it, not because it helped her backhand, not because a sponsorship deal depended on it, but because she wanted to connect with real people, on their terms, in their language. And somewhere in the stands, in the area reserved for tournament dignitaries and former champions, one particular person processed all of this with an expression that the cameras fortunately captured in extraordinary detail. Steffi Graf did not move, completely frozen. And that stillness communicated something that no words could have expressed more precisely. Think about what it means for Steffi Graf specifically to be frozen. This is a woman who stood at the absolute summit of professional tennis for 15 years. A woman who won 22 Grand Slam titles across singles, doubles, and mixed. A woman who achieved the Golden Slam, all 4 majors and an Olympic gold in the same calendar year, something no player in history has replicated. A woman whose composure under pressure became almost mythological. A woman who had seen everything professional tennis had to offer across 5 decades of intimate involvement with the sport. And she could not move. Because what she was watching wasn't just impressive athleticism or even exceptional competitive results. She was watching something the sport almost never produces and absolutely cannot manufacture. A completely unguarded, completely human moment of genuine connection that had nothing to do with winning and everything to do with who someone actually is when the match is temporarily paused and nobody is officially watching. Within 4 minutes of the changeover ending, the clip was already circulating. Not on official tournament channels, those were still broadcasting the match. On personal accounts, on fan pages, on the kind of informal digital infrastructure that modern sports culture has developed specifically to capture moments the broadcast misses. The hashtag began trending in Germany within the hour. Filipino fan communities, already among the most passionate and organized supporter groups in contemporary women's tennis, amplified it globally within 90 minutes. The numbers climbed with the specific velocity reserved for content that requires no explanation. Moments so immediately comprehensible, so viscerally affecting, that algorithmic barriers simply dissolve around them. Comments poured in across multiple languages. German fans expressed disbelief mixed with something that looked very much like genuine pride. Filipino supporters wrote paragraphs about what it means to watch one of their own move so naturally through a world historically built to exclude them. Tennis purists who normally resist anything that diverts attention from the athletic competition found themselves sharing the clip anyway. One comment captured something essential: she didn't have to do that. And that, precisely, was the entire point. The most powerful gestures in human interaction are always the unnecessary ones. The ones that cost nothing logistically but reveal everything about character. Eala could have sat in silence during that changeover. She could have offered a polite nod.